The Tennessee Titans are coming off their first season with a losing record in 5 years under head coach Mike Vrabel. How do they respond in 2023? It's Titans Day, and we're breaking them down from every angle today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started.
Joe, happy National Kyle bought a new box of pens. Day to you.
This is big. You know me and my pens.
I know you. There's probably some new everydayers who are not familiar with your pen situation. If you'd like to explain it to them, because I knew what it was, and that's why I set it up.
So this has probably been, I would guess, 8 to 10 years now, where I've lived in this world where I only use the same pen until it completely runs out of ink. Right, like I start to finish. This is the current active pen right here. And I have more pens right here. So two things with the pen dynamics in me is I believe in only using one pen until it's completely used. But then also I've found my pen, right? I think that's a big thing for people to like, hey, this is my brand, my make and model.
Preferred. It's the feel of the pen. It's how it feels when you touch it to paper. It's what kind of ink it leaves behind. Yeah. So tell us about your pen.
Well,
we say no hashtag no free pub on the show, but
well, I guess sponsor me if you'd like, Pentel, for your Energel RTX
Pentel guy, huh?
Liquid gel pen. And I love the colors. Like I like blue ink, black ink. Can we write in green? Can we write in red and orange and purple? Like, I like to write in different colors. So
Pilot 2G. Excuse me, Pilot G2.
It's a good pen. It's a good pen. But it's black. You're a black ink guy or what?
Yes, I am. And I got myself a little bit of white out because I'm working on a project right now. So
wow, I don't even know what this project is, but we got white out. You know, it's
top secret. Top secret. You'll know soon enough. But happy National I Bought New Pens Day yesterday.
Thank you. What a day! What a day this is.
So we're gonna talk about the Titans today.
Yeah.
And the Titans are a team, Joe, as you mentioned, who endured their least successful season since 2000. Oh God, I'm going to do the math off the top of my head here. 18? Is that
Vrabel's first year was 18? Yes.
Okay, so their least successful season since 2018, in which Tennessee reached the midway point of the season. They won that game against Green Bay in Green Bay, and they moved to 8-3. Was it 7-3?
They were humming. They were humming,
and of course, Tom Downing has an incident on the way home from that game. And it felt like that point onward for Tennessee, everything, Tom Downing, the former OC, everything falls off for Tennessee down the stretch. And they play the winning in game against Jacksonville, week 18. They do not win that football game, so they miss the playoffs for the first time in the past several seasons. They've kind of been the stalwart of the AFC South. I would to acknowledge that Tennessee, from a team-building perspective, had a definitive 6-year window of highly competitive football in which they won the division a bunch of times, went to the playoffs a bunch of times. I think that context is very important for Tennessee because we're going to talk about them being a transitional team and a team in transition, and that upheaval is going to mean you're going to have to relearn how to crawl before you can walk again. But they had a very successful stretch. They didn't get hot at the right time of the year to win in the postseason and make a finished run. They did play in an AFC championship game, and I think that this is kind of an example of life cycles in the NFL is what the Titans had, how they were able to compete, and now how they have to scale back and retransition and gear back up again.
7-3 to 7-10. That's how it finished.
7-3,
Yeah, that's a tough finish. Like you mentioned, two different playoff runs. One where they were the number one seed in the playoffs, and a completely different one where they went to the AFC Championship game. I have a lot of criticism towards John Robinson. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, I tend to get that out as often as I possibly can, because I think I hold him responsible for not making the necessary moves to get this team over the hump, right? We knew that they were kind of in it. I think you want to be as good as you can for as long as you can, but like there's humps that you have to get over. And I don't think he was ever able to do it. And I think that comes from needs-based drafting. I think that big timeout here, right?
I'm taking a timeout.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
So when you reflect on that ideology, do you think that is more reflective of them not being aggressive enough, of them trying to extend the window as long as they can without maximizing the window? Like there's a number of different schools of thought that I think could have been kind of at the crux of this, but ultimately, as you said, we never crescendoed at the right time.
Right. And first of all, they leaned into a winning recipe that is a winning recipe, but it's a little bit tougher, right? Not necessarily having elite quarterback play, being your identity being running the football with Derrick Henry and playing good defense, right? And that certainly got a lot of wins, but not necessarily the right wins. But I thought John Robinson, whether it was needs-based drafting, whether it was not retaining players, right? Just very impulsive, like getting rid of guys, never really like having plans for a lot of players, it would seem. But then also you look at two critical spots, wide receiver and edge rusher. And like how many missed throws at the dartboard did we have that limited this football team when that was what they needed? And so, yeah, I thought there was a lot of like, oh my gosh, they're moving on from John Robinson. I'm like, celebrate, Titans fans, because this, I think, has been the biggest thing that's held you back as an organization. And so we haven't even gotten into the offense or defense, because I think that does set the tone for this conversation, because it is a unique situation, the way that they've won, their path forward, the fact that Rand Carthen's now taking over for John Robinson, the success that Mike Vrabel's had. I mean, Mike Vrabel's one of 9 coaches in the entire NFL that have been with their team for 5 or more seasons, right? That's it. Like, he's been one of the most successful coaches over the last 5 years. There's only 9 that can say that they've been on the same team for 5 full seasons to this point.
Well, and last year was their first non-winning season, even extending further back than Mike Vrabel since 2015. Case in point. They've won at least 9, 9, 9, 9, 11, 12.
Right.
7-3.
7. Yeah.
Like, what an awesome stretch of consistency to play winning football. But it never graduated to the point, other than when you were 9-7 and made a quarterback change mid-season.
Yeah.
And you had this brand new dynamic with Ryan Tannehill versus Marcus Mariota that presented new challenges for teams to have to defend you. And you took advantage of that and then ran that off to 23 wins over the next 2 seasons, 23-10.
Well, this podcast has taken on a life of its own. I think the way this is going to wind up working is next segment will be offense. The last segment will be on defense. But before we get there, we're going to tell you about FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's simply no better place to get in on the action than over at FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. And folks, I love betting over at FanDuel. It's a safe, secure, easy-to-use app with great promotions every day. And it's not just the baseball that you can get in on. The football's futures bets are so fun. So they have win totals, right? Over, under for win totals for each team. Player props, projected rushing stats, receiving stats, passing stats for all the players. There's week 1 line odds. There's awards that you can get in on if you like those odds. So much fun stuff over at America's #1 sportsbook. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Okay, Joe. Let's talk about the offense.
Right. Yeah, let's
kind of did segment 3 off the top there, which, as you said, the show takes on a life of its own and usually does. Offensively, We started this offseason with some conversation about Derrick Henry potentially being on the trade block. I'm glad they didn't go that route. But I do think what is overly apparent based on the maneuvers, where they spent their money, Tennessee, I expect this to continue. The DNA of what they've been offensively is going to continue to be the ideology of who the Titans are. There's not a lot of dynamic threats on the perimeter to win on the outside. We're going to try to play bully ball. We spent a lot of money in free agency to bring in some new pieces between Andre Dillard and Daniel Brunskill, and they drafted Peter Skoronski with a top 12 pick. Like, that's all good infusion for an offensive line that desperately needed it. We still have Derrick Henry. We drafted Tyjae Spears on day 2. So we've put ourselves in a position to, what we've been is what we are going to continue to be. And I think that kind of reaffirms the identity of this football team. But the question, of course, is if they have enough counter punches off of the core identity of what they are offensively.
Man, look at this offensive line. Stalwarts, Ben Jones, Taylor Lewan, Nate Davis, gone. One offseason, right? Swapping them all out for Brunskill, Skoronski, and Dillard. Aaron Brewer, kind of your returning player, shifting over to center this year. I mean, he's such a fascinating guy. He's like 275 pounds, 280
ultimate
pounds.
outlier.
Yes,
yeah.
Good for him that he's found a way to stick like he has. And then Nicholas Petit-Frere is a returning starter at right tackle who was a surprise starter for them last year. And so, I think step one here for this offense is going to be getting this offensive line sorted out and getting them functioning as one, because you've got 3 guys that are completely new, Brewer in a new spot, right? I mean, so there's just a lot to unpack. And then you're probably asking yourself questions about some of your depth in Jalen Duncan and Dylan Raduns, and like, are they in actual battles to win a job? Is there a path for them, right? So I think they got to sort out this offensive line, and then from there, obviously, we know what Derrick Henry can do. You got to figure out your passing game, and your most appealing weapons are your 2 second-year players in Treylon Burks and Chigo Okonkwo, the tight end. Man, we're excited about Chigo. I mean, I know that you were pretty high on him early.
Brand, baby.
Then we saw him at Shrine, right? And like, okay,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
different
He's
kind of
a little
cat.
bit of a player. He stands out versus some of these other guys out here.
Pretty raw guy to come into an offense that didn't have a whole lot going for him, to have the production he did as a rookie, right? That's pretty uncommon for tight ends. So like,
he had 32 for 450 and 3 touchdowns last year, 14 yards per catch.
It's pretty good production for a rookie tight end in this offense, right? So, but it's fair to look at these weapons collectively and say, well, I mean, you really need those guys to emerge. Even a Kyle Phillips in the slot, like, you need that guy to find himself this year, because outside of Derrick Henry, I don't see proven weapons here. I don't see a lot of depth in these options in the passing game for Ryan Tannehill, who's like, let's face it, this is probably his last season with the team, as they've made recent investments. And well, I mean, you can look to Malik Willis,
2 quarterbacks in the last 2 years.
Will Levis was picked 33, right? I mean, they traded up for him.
Yeah, they came up and got him. I have a quiz question for you.
Oh boy. Okay.
And we're acknowledging that kind of the skill group is kind of the mystery of this offense. And if they have enough pieces and if they have enough dynamic athleticism to really kind of have enough counter punches off their run game, and they're obviously going to play action pass a ton and keep the pressure off the offensive line to just straight up pass protect. But the receiver, the offensive player, I should say, on Tennessee's offense, who is returning from last year, who caught the most amount of footballs for the team in 2022. Who is it, and how many catches did they have?
Was it Nick Westbrook-Akini, and he caught 32 passes or something like that?
Your number's very close. There were 2 that caught 33.
All right.
Nick caught 25.
Okay, so it wasn't him.
Derrick Henry and Treylon Burks each caught 33 passes last year. They are the returning leading receivers from last year's team. Robert Woods and Austin Hooper were the departures. They were top 2 on the team in targets and top 2 in the team in receptions. Now, obviously, the dynamic play of both of those players, and Robert Woods at this stage of his career, I don't know that those are great losses, but I think you look at it from the sense of there's 150 targets that have been opened up in this offense from what there was last year, and we really didn't bring anybody in. How do you redistribute those 150 targets? how do you maximize those opportunities within your passing game? I think is a fascinating question. You're hoping Treylon Burks gets as many of them as you possibly can because he only had 54 last year.
Yeah, you'd like to think he doubles that, right? I mean, that should be a reasonable goal for Treylon, but also, I mean, this is a DeAndre Hopkins team. It should be, right? I mean, when you consider, I think, he took a visit there, right? I know there's familiarity with Vrabel.
His visit came before he went to New England.
Right. That's the 2 visits he's taken, right? I know that he's had conversations with other teams, but showing up for those 2 opportunities, I think says a lot. But I mean, if I'm Tennessee, like, get it done. You're not, it's maybe there's a little PTSD from the Julio trade. I don't know, but like, you're not giving up anything. You're going to sign him to a deal, but like, you've got targets, to your point, 150 available. And yeah, I mean, even if 50 something of those goes to Burks, which should be where you want a lot of those.
Still got 100 targets. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Send them to Hop.
And 80% of DeAndre Hopkins is still at this stage in everybody's career. I don't want to necessarily blow this out of proportion, but 80% of what DeAndre Hopkins has been is still probably the best receiver on this team, right?
Dude, for sure. For sure. But obviously, there's ceiling with some of these guys that you get excited about. But yeah, we watched the tape on Hop. We went back when all this stuff started.
The show. Yeah.
We did the show. We watched the film. And it's like, okay, man, this guy still runs nuanced routes, body control, hands, ball skills are elite. Yeah, he's never been a burner. Like, okay, that's not going to all of a sudden change, but guy can get open and catch the football and command good volume of targets and be somebody you're happy with.
And if my memory serves me correctly, there is a player who was somewhat of a non-dynamic, shifty, high football IQ slot player that Ryan Tannehill vibed with quite a bit back in the day.
Oh,
Mr. Jarvis Landry.
Oh.
And Nuke at this stage still has more in the tank than like Jarvis had at his peak when Jarvis ran 4.7 and coming out.
Man, that's a good point.
So
incredible.
Please, Tennessee, make that happen. I would really enjoy that addition to this offense for Mike Vrabel and the Titans.
They could sign Jarvis Landry.
They could, yeah.
So like if you don't get Hop, I mean, I just think the point needs. I think it's understood that they need more here in terms of collective weapons here. How fun is Tyjae Spears now on this football team? Man, what a player he is.
Excited to see him as the counterpunch to what they have in Henry, So not surprised that they went that route either, obviously with kind of the discussion around Derrick Henry and him being floated out as a trade candidate. And depending on how this season goes for Tennessee, if they're not competitive, maybe that's a trade deadline thing that you could see revisited if they have to be honest. But I think the way that you mentioned just on the offensive line with Lawan and Ben Jones, like these long-term pillars of what they were, moving on from those players, it certainly feels like Derrick Henry's stretch of 350 touches and just being a workhorse, I don't doubt he can continue to get it done. But if you look at the life cycle of Tennessee and as they gear up, what are those finances best attributed for, especially with, having some exciting young pieces in the offensive backfield between Hassan Haskins, who I think has a little something to him as a power player, and then Tyjae Spears is a very different dynamic. And it feels like they've been chasing that kind of player for a couple of years now, too.
Yeah, with Darrington Evans, right? They drafted him 3rd, 4th round, something like that.
Middle round guy.
I think one of the challenges for Derrick Henry this year, 2 challenges that are pretty significant. First of all, I would say the adjusting to the offensive line, right? New pieces, right? And I remember, I'll never forget Jonathan Taylor at the Combine. He was asked about, how do you have such great vision? And he's like, I know my offensive line. I know the way that they're going to take on blocks. I know that the angles that they're going to have, and I can work off of them because I can anticipate stylistically how they're going to approach. And obviously you think about Wisconsin, a lot of continuity with the offensive line, and Jonathan Taylor was able to really feast there. For Derrick Henry, I mean, he's going to have to really adjust to a lot of new pieces this year, which he, to his credit, he did last year and had to do it on the fly and still had a lot of production. But when you combine that with probably a lot of heavy boxes, right? I think defenses are going to play Tennessee and say, well, okay, we see Derrick Henry's back there. Let's go ahead and take that guy away the best we can and see what you can do in terms of throwing the football with Ryan Tannehill and your other weapons. So heavy box counts and adjusting to a lot of new blockers is going to be the challenge ahead for King Henry this year.
And just a final thought as we get ready to transition over to the defensive side of the ball, Joe, but that continued chasing of that different dynamic to pair with Derrick Henry. Do you remember the running back that they signed for like $5 million per season?
Yeah, it was Lewis. Damian Lewis or Dion Lewis?
Dion Lewis from New England. He signed a 4-year, just short of $20 million, like 19.75 across 4 years back in 2018. And over the last 10 years, that is the 16th highest APY for a running back to sign with a new team in free agency.
Whoa. Man, you're right. They really kind of have been trying to find a guy to go with them.
Mm-hmm.
This type of player.
And I think Spears is as good of an option as you're going to have to get it. Excited to see what that looks like, but just need to have enough counter punches off. That's the big mystery for where Tennessee lies offensively. We are going to do the defensive side of the ball and then come to consensus on one outstanding player for Tennessee here as we bring this episode of Locked On NFL Scouting to a close. Okay, defensively. Here's the good news. I think there's a lot to work with on the defensive side of the football for the Titans. You think about Jeffery Simmons and him being as impressive and as disruptive of a player as he has been for the past several seasons. Obviously, that's a financial commitment that it's a no-brainer, right?
Mm-hmm.
to get him locked in and have him be a pillar piece. But you have Harold Landry. You have Denico Autry. You have Kevin Byard. The subplot with Byard and whatever the heck happened with asking for a pay cut this offseason or whatever is a different story. You have a couple cornerstones, a couple quality starters. I think Amani Hooker's turned into a really good football player for them. We've got some bodies here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it's a little bit of an incomplete build, but at the end of the day, I like the pillars that we have to work with in Tennessee.
Yeah, man. You mentioned Jeffery Simmons, and I give them a lot of credit for the timing of that deal, getting ahead of Quinnen Williams, getting ahead of, all of those defensive tackles, right? He was first before Lawrence, before Oliver. We're still waiting on Wilkins. But Chris Jones, right? I mean, that's going to be a huge deal that's coming through. And I think them coming in and getting that done was great for maximizing their costs. But welcome back, Harold Landry, right? I mean, that's going to be such a nice addition to this unit. For all the pass rushing, edge rushing challenges that they've had over the years, I think Harold Landry has been a stabilizing player for them. And obviously he missed all of last year. That'll be big for him to be back. And, given the timing of when that injury occurred, you feel like he should be able to hit the ground running entering this season. And I love Denico Autry, man. They've really unlocked him. I think he's been a good player, but the way that he's been able to make an impact, being versatile, defending the run, rushing the passer from multiple alignments, man, he's probably one of the more underrated players in the game. And then Tier Tardo, I think, is a very serviceable interior defensive lineman as well. And so I'd like that 4-man situation here in terms of your kind of your front. I'm fascinated by the linebackers because Monty Rice, I think, played well down the stretch last year. Who they picked fairly high. I mean, I think he looks like he could be at least a serviceable starter, but Azeez Al-Shaair is kind of the X factor for me here with this group because obviously this was Cunningham and David Long who moved on. But Al-Shaair is a guy that's kind of been stuck in San Francisco, if you will, with Dre Greenlaw and of course, Fred Warner. And I think he's going to kind of have the opportunity to be a guy here for them and really patrol this unit and have some opportunity behind a pretty good front. And so this front seven, if you will, really intrigues me in a lot of ways. And I think some of the younger players taking a step, especially at linebacker, will be really critical.
Can I give some flowers to Rand Carthon here?
Sure.
Because you mentioned Al-Shaair and being stuck. I think what what Tennessee did in signing Al-Shaair and then also Andre Dillard, who was stuck in Philadelphia behind Jordan Maitala and Lane Johnson.
Yep.
I think you're getting players that have a chance to be adequate level starters or potentially better for your football team based on their physical skill sets, who didn't necessarily have great opportunities to showcase themselves. And maybe when those dollars came in, specifically on the Dillard deal, everybody's eyes got a little wide and said like, oh, wow, like they paid him a pretty good amount of money. They very clearly think that's a starting caliber player. But when you look at it through the lens of what Bobby Okereke got at $10 million per season to sign, obviously a different player, different bill, and what Mike McGlinchey got to sign in free agency, I mean, they got way more per season for players who have some ceiling. And I think with an opportunity, to, if they both live up to their potential, we're going to get to this time next year. We're going to say, yeah, these are really team-friendly deals for Tennessee for the market value which they paid to get the players in the building.
Kind of continuing on the strengths of this defense. I mean, you mentioned Byard and Hooker. That's one of the better safety tandems in the entire NFL, right? I mean, really, really good. But also some players at corner that I like in Roger McCreary. I mean, how good was he as a rookie? They bring in Sean Murphy-Bunting. Elijah Molden comes back off of injury from last year. Had a lot of promise as a rookie. Kristian Fulton, who I think has established himself as a starter. You know, I think that's collectively in the secondary a reasonable amount of talent to work with. So like you mentioned here, as we shifted over to the defensive side of the football, I think there's just a lot more to like and allows them to be formidable. And I think that helps take some of the pressure off of the offensive side where we think there could be more struggles.
My most eye-opening statistic for Tennessee defensively last year is they allowed 5 more points this year than they did the previous season, 359 to 354. And yet in 2022, they were 14th in scoring defenses compared to 6th in 2021, based off a 5-point difference. Now, they were also minus 61 in point differential versus plus 65 because they couldn't crack 300 points scored across 17 games last year. But 14th in scoring defense, but only 5 points more than a top 6 scoring defense the previous season.
And
without Harold Landry.
Right, without Harold Landry. So, less turnover on the defensive side of the football as well. So I think that's what you want to lean into. You want to run the football and play good defense. I think that's kind of your recipe. But obviously, I'd like to see this team evolve with the passing game. And who knows, maybe Will Levis will be their guy. I mean, I like Will Levis. There's a modest investment, right? I mean, was pick 33, something like that. Like I think there's a big difference between being pick 33 and being like, they could have picked him at where they picked Skoronski, like 11 or 12, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that changes the expectation and allows him to kind of have an onboarding year and kind of we'll see. But I hope that they get some answers with their weapons and their offensive line this year and they can add to it and, expedite the transition, right? I mean, it's the AFC South. Jacksonville looks pretty good, but I mean, even Tennessee had to lose their last 7 games for that to happen, right? Like maybe it's a transition, but this isn't like some of the other conversations we've had for teams in transition.
And I think the challenge for them is finding those pieces amidst the final stages of who your pillars were before, and namely in the backfield, and Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. Those have been established, effective starters. With Henry, one of the best backs in the game, and Tannehill, when they had complementary football, he was capable of being a highly effective complementary quarterback. But how do you build that runway? How do you take on that runway? Now, I appreciate the effort that they made the last 2 years to put themselves in position and acquire quarterbacks to swing the bat. Obviously, the Malik Willis acquisition doesn't look great right now. I don't think there was any world in which he probably should have started games last year. But, the circumstances for the way the season played out for Tennessee, you force him to go out there and take a look at what he's got. And obviously they didn't like enough of what they saw, and they shouldn't have. He didn't play particularly well. So that's the Titans. Any parting thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, I do have a parting thought. That stadium looks sick.
Yes, it does.
Man, 2026?
Yes, it does.
No, 2027 is when it opens, man.
Not soon enough is when it opens.
Brother, dude, Like we've seen a lot of new stadiums come through in the NFL. This is one that I'm like, oh my God, I got to see it. I got to get out there.
That's close for you.
It's close enough. In 2027, right. we're going to be there at some point.
Listen, the Wilmington Airport now flies Avello Airlines directly to Nashville. I can go for like $40.
Wow. The draft dudes take Nashville.
Yeah,
see
we'll go back
in 2027.
Just like the 2019 draft, right? Like do it all over again.
We will.
Right. Well, that does it for today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. Joe, tomorrow on the show, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay, yes.
Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield's Tampa Bay Buccaneers are next. And then we have the Arizona Cardinals and the New Orleans Saints to bring all 32 teams to a close, Joe. This is our last week for the scouting of the 2023 Team X series. It's been fun, been a lot of fun. It's cool seeing what fan bases show up for their teams. If you are a team that is coming up, make sure you show up for your team, but keep it locked in on a daily basis because it is your team every day. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. I'm Kyle Crabbs, he's Joe Marino, and we are out of here. Peace.